Hi there, my name is Ron Rogers, and this presentation is titled United Airlines Flight 328, February 20, 2021. Now, this was an incident that occurred on a flight going from Denver, Colorado to Honolulu. And it's like, well, guys, 3 years earlier we had a similar incident and we just kind of didn't learn our lesson on this one, did we? But this time, we had a much more experienced crew on this flight. More of what I hate to say, but more of what you'd expect as a wide-body crew. The captain had 28,000 hours of flight time. He was kind of low as far as hours on the 777-414, but when you got that much flight time, you really make up for low time on the aircraft. And the first officer had 18,000 hours, and he had about 355 hours. So both these guys had been on the airplane less than a year, but they handled this situation very well and very professionally. Now, this was kind of interesting. They're going from Denver, Colorado to Honolulu, and just like I said, just like the other incident there, must be something about Honolulu, and they had a blade fail. And this one they considered contained. Now you look at the engine shroud up there on the right engine, that little brown part, that's supposed to contain the engine, and well, the nacelle separated, and quite a bit of the nacelle area. So, as Robert Sumwall said, it was technically a contained engine failure, although they lost a lot of pieces, and a lot of pieces fell on a 1 mile area in Broomfield, Colorado. It's kind of interesting. My daughter and her family lives north of that area. They didn't get any airplane parts though, but it was a 1 mile area that this guy was shedding parts. Now, Robert Sumwald was the head of the NTSB. And Robert and I had kind of an interesting background. He and I both did a lot of ALPA safety work together. He was a pilot for U.S. Airways, and we were at a lot of meetings together. And I remember the last time I saw Robert, we were at a meeting in San Diego, and we were out in one of the touristy areas there, and we were just talking about general safety stuff, and he was enjoying a very fine cigar. And Robert has had a good career, as you probably are aware. He got on the NTSB board at 2006, and he became the chairman at 2017, and retired from it at 2021. Well, let's talk about this little situation here. Okay, so they're taking off on runway 25, heading west, and I'll show the airport diagram and talk about that in just a second. They ended up coming back to runway 26 after 24 minutes of flight, but they're taking off, and this was a little bit more serious because they had just departed the airfield. They're heavyweight. Fortunately, it was sufficient time after V1 and V2, so they're well airborne and on their way. But they were passing about 12,500 feet, and anytime you head west out of Denver, you need to get over those big rocks out there, the Rocky Mountains. And of course, I flew that many times in especially in the 727, where it doesn't climb very well, and the controllers kid you about ski reports because you're just creasing up the mountains there. But anyway, they needed to get some altitude, and coming out of 12.5, they're doing 280 knots, which is the rough air penetration speed, because they had some turbulence instead of the normal 300 knots or so that you would normally climb out. So they advanced power to begin a little bit steeper climb, and they had a loud noise, and that's just not something you want. So they it gives the airplane a shudder. They get an engine fire, and here's right behind the throttles there. You can see the cutoff there, the fuel shut off knobs up there, and they got a fire light. So you rotate the handle to discharge the fire bottle. Of course, you follow the checklist that comes up on the ECAM there, and you follow the checklist. You rotate it, and you wait 30 seconds, and that light's supposed to go out. And there's the checklist is cool because in the olden days, you had to time this, but on the checklist, a timer automatically starts, and about 30 seconds, this is supposed to go out. Well, it didn't go out in 30 seconds, so you discharge the other bottle, and it still didn't go out. That's just not a good thing. Now, I've turned the airport diagram for Denver on its side there so you can see everything just a little bit better. The green arrow is circled around runway 25. That is the runway they departed off of, and they came back, the yellow circle there, to runway 26, of course, landing into the wind, obviously, and taking off into the wind. Now, when I flew this same trip, and it was totally uneventful because I got to Honolulu. That was very nice. But when I flew this event, because it was during the summer, actually it was very early in the program. It was one of the first flights out of Denver to Honolulu. And we had to use runway 16. Now you notice runway 25 and 26 are both 12,000 feet long. Of course, this is a high altitude airport at Denver, 5,000 feet. But because of the higher temperatures, they used runway 16, which is 16,000 feet long, and supposedly the longest runway, paved runway in the States. And I used virtually all of that runway getting airborne. So here's the flight path, and they took off, scattered debris over Bloomfield there, came back on around like you see in the bottom part of the trace there where they're over Denver. That's when they finally got rid of the engine fire. Now what they did, okay, normally you got a problem with this. You lose an engine, you're heavyweight, you took off. You want to come back around, go through all of your checklists, which they did, but you want to go out and you want to dump some fuel so you get down to maximum landing weight or below. Well, you got a fire that doesn't go out, and it's kind of like, guys, I think we want to get this airplane on the ground. So they made a very good decision in deciding, yeah, we're going to get this airplane on the ground. We don't quite know what's going on here. The fire doesn't go out. That's not a good thing. Let's get this little puppy back down. Now, an overweight landing is really not that big of a deal because all the criteria that goes in to determine, the landing weight, the structural loads and stuff like this, focus around a landing where you have a 10-foot per minute rate of descent contacting the runway. Now that is quite a good rate of descent, and I've done these in flight test, and I go out and fly my airline trips, and I can get that landing easily. I've had a few landings that haven't been the best, especially in the 27, which keeps you very honest. But I've had a few of those. But you try to do them in flight test, and it's just hard as heck to get that decent rate and take it right to the ground. But okay, I digress. Anyway, if you make a smooth landing, they do an overweight landing check, and it's no big deal whatsoever. And you can bring the airplane down heavier weight. Now, you got to consider, of course, you're at higher altitude. They got a good long runway, but you're at higher altitude, and you're going to have a higher true air speed, so you're bringing more energy into the landing. But this airplane has great brakes, and you can get it stopped. So, you're in pretty good shape in that respect. But just for reference, let's talk about that engine on the 777. That is a big engine. That's me standing on the right here back when we're doing some flight test on the 777. Oh, and this 777 that had this incident, it was in the flight test program as WA005. And like I mentioned, I'd flown the 777 in flight test. So this was one of the original airplanes, and these are the A models that had the 77,000-pound engines, the 4077 Pratt & Whitneys, which were the smaller engines, and they were also configured 325 seats, if I remember correctly, going to Honolulu. So these were kind of our cattle cars, if you will, that carried the big load. Normally our 777s, when I were flying them, they were like 285 seats, 3 class, and those were a lot of the Europe ones. But Hawaii is a big market, so we got an airplane with a lot of seats. But this is a big engine. And you look at the reference there. Yeah, we used to talk about that the engine is the same as the 737 fuselage. So when you're setting in your 737 next time, just think of how big that engine is. Of course, here's a picture of it after the damage. The cowling is gone. The thrust reverser area, that black area there, and look at the soot around the engine there too, where it continued to burn. So that's why these guys wanted to get this thing on the ground. But you can see that black containment ring is contained, although it was shedding parts. It technically, as Robert said, it was contained. And here's a picture of the blade where it's separated. And of course, when it goes out, it damages the other blades. And of course, here's the cross section, and these are hollow blades. They make these blades hollow for, of course, saving weight and also for cooling. But they believe the crack originated back in 2010. And of course, after the accident in 2018, they said, well, we got to do this inspection a little more frequently. We're going to do it at about 6,000 cycles. Well, this thing failed at about 3,000 cycles. So it didn't even make it to the new improved inspection. And there were other incidents between the 18 and ours at 2018 and 2021 where they had engine blade failures too. So this was an ongoing problem. And of course they had the thermal imaging where they took and used acoustic sound, as I explained on the other one, where it causes vibration and the crack will cause a heat spot if you analyze it correctly. This is a picture of the aircraft back in maintenance, and you got the big section there where the fan's actually been removed. These are a bunch of the parts that were recovered. Look at that ring separated, that front cowling ring. This is the part that is anti-iced by hot pneumatic air. That ring out front, that is in pretty complete positioning with the rest of the structure there, and you can see the other components. And they also had some damage to the fuselage there, which obviously is not what you want, but it apparently didn't cause them too much problems. But here is the main cowling where it came down, and fortunately nobody on the ground was injured. You know, these are not light pieces, and they're coming down. Of course, you know, humor tends to come out in a situation like this. This picture appeared as a joke that it was an ad on eBay where a guy put a certain price tag on this and said, "No low ball offers. I know what I have here." But of course, all this was turned over to the NTSB. And of course, you don't want to be coming out of the bathroom and suddenly get hit by airplane parts. Like I said, there are a lot of these scattered over Broomfield. Well, here's my favorite 777 picture again. That's my final flight out of Maui. This was the aircraft that had the engine problem back. Actually, the same airplane that had the engine problem back in 2018 going into Honolulu. That was what I flew on my final flight. But the final report that NTSB published on September 8th, 2023 was that the fatigue failure in the right engine was due to inadequate inspections and insufficient frequency of inspections to catch low-level crack indications. The low-level cracks continue to propagate until ultimate failure. Additionally, the use of carbon fiber reinforced plastic instead of aluminum in the cowling, as used during certification tests on engine inlet, caused the inlet to fail to adequately dissipate the energy of the fan blade out event, failing to prevent additional damage. The NTSB found the severity of the fire damage was due to a failure of a K flange. I don't know what that is, but it's probably a flange that occurs after the J flange. Anyway, the K flange failed, and after the blade failure. Now, failure of these flanges allowed hot gas to spread and damage components that carried flammable fluids. The fire propagated to undercowl and thrust reverser areas where the fire could not be extinguished. Now, one of the things that you want to keep the cowl intact is because you discharge the discharge agent, and the cowl keeps it close to the engine to help with that. Of course, they had already discharged the agent, and it would tend to dissipate more because there's no cowl to contain it. And the fact that they had this leak, they were not able to prevent the fire from the other fluids that are in the engine, such as oil and a little bit of hydraulic fluid that's connected to the pumps there. But the main fluid would have been the oil, most likely. They determined this was not a fuel-fed fire, because when you pull that fire handle, it's supposed to shut off everything: fuel, hydraulics, electrics, everything. You just isolate the engine up from the nacelle on. and that's supposed to, take care of the fire and any issues like that. And that's the way these systems work. Well, they finally realized that this cowling was not up to the task, and of course the aircraft were grounded for a little bit over a year before they finally redesigned the cowl, as they probably should in the first place, and they should not have allowed the certification or the adoption of the carbon fiber cowls to occur after they had used aluminum to certify it. And if you've ever seen the video of a fan blade out test, which the engine manufacturers have to do, that cowl moves a lot. And in doing so, it essentially deforms but doesn't break. It remains intact, and it absorbs the stress of that blade, because a full blade is about 45 inches long, 28 inches at the tip, and weighs about 35 pounds. So these things are good size, and containing them when they depart at high speed is not an easy task, but it's something you need to do. And of course, in this situation, even though this was considered a contained failure of the blade, technically, you still had a lot of damage and fallout. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you found it informative and enjoyable. Thank you.